I got a real special couple of guests here today. I have Dale from his channel Beyond the Imaginary Curve and his buddy Gav. And both these guys are from Scotland, so they have a real thick accent. You might want to turn it up and so you can catch everything. But I've been looking forward to this interview for quite some time. Well, Dale, like I say, he's a real practical guy. If you ever tune into his channel, be sure and treat him with respect because he'll give you an old-fashioned tongue lashing. And Gav, he's got the technical degrees. He got a double major in math and physics, so we'll kind of have to pull back on the reins on him because he'll get so deep in the woods, you will be dizzy for a week. So first off, I had just one question to kind of kick it off, about when both of y'all were kind of coming to the conclusion about the shape of the earth and the flat plane. Which one of y'all came to this conclusion first, and how did you present it to the other one, and how did y'all go about coming to the conclusion of that? So I'll let either one of y'all kick it off.
Maybe I'll just go on that one, Bill. I think we both came to independently, so we didn't know each other. I think it was approximately the same time, 2015 roundabout, when we both got, how should I say, interested in the whole topic. So I actually approached Dale. I think because of the fact that within that topic of flat Earth, there was a lot of different actors and different people saying different things. It was very difficult to discern, where the truth lay and who were honest inquirers and who were just maybe people looking to make money or make fame. So I kind of trusted my Scottish heritage, let's say, and then I thought to myself, well, Dale looks like a man of my taste, and I just approached Dale, and that's what kind of kicked it off. And then I appeared in a couple of his hangouts, and it went from there.
Okay, Dale, what was your thoughts about it, and when you originally came to it?
I think it was a combination of investigating various topics through the years. I've always been somebody who's doubted the majority of the structure of society, history, the way education went. And I came to it because I was fed up putting my attention to things, particularly things that were of no relevance to me and I could never get any clarity or closure on. So I turned my attention to becoming what we would term as a direct realist, or basing things on my practical experience and what I can verify for myself. So as I say, it was a combination of performing mental gymnastics and various rabbit holes of never-ending conspiracy and possibility, and as I say, I get fed up with that, and broke myself away from any sort of bias, and I started to have a real critical look at every aspect of my life and what I'd taken for granted and assumed to be true. And obviously, when the shape of the earth came to my attention, just like everybody else, it was kind of difficult, a bit of hand wave with nothing going on, but it came very, very quickly for me on the simple aspect of water's behaviour, and something that I could never escape or deny. So that was pretty much it.
And maybe just to add on to that, so I think everybody's gone through their own history of seeing through deceit and lies and manipulation in whatever field it might be, whether it's legalese, politics, social, academia. We're all coming from different places here. I think, when everybody hits the topic of natural science, then one, it's something that you can, verify for yourself. It's not hearsay, you can actually study the properties of water. You know them from your lived life. So, in a lot of ways, it's an easier topic to talk about or to inquire into. So, I'm pretty sure Dale was the same. I was in a Socratic fever for a couple of months when I first heard of it, and you try and debunk it, right? You try and see, is this all true, what I'm being told here? I've never thought about it that way, and obviously you have to do your own research, you have to do your own work. to actually come to the final conclusion and become a direct realist and realize that it can't all be true the way they're telling us. And maybe just one other thing. I thought it was important also to show that people from all walks of life can agree on that. So I mean, one of the reasons I went to Dale was to show that I have everything in common with a normal people, right? Even if I come from an academic background, we can still share exactly that, the same opinions and the same method of inquiry.
Well, that's it. It comes down to the fact that this topic's objective inquiry, and when we're talking natural science, everyone has to relate to it because it's about practical demonstration, real world physics, where it requires no belief, no faith, no hearsay. And just as Gav said, it does not matter to me whether you're a PhD, a professor or whatever, or a common man. This unites us on a common ground, where nobody has any kind of superiority, and I think it's also important to put across to people that we don't come at this from professing some sort of flat earth. For us, the earth's demonstrably a level plane. The full dimensions of what this place is unbeknownst to us, and we make absolutely no claim to know that. A lot of that, the idea of flat earth is propaganda based. Images have been put out there, ideas and notions of flat earth or flat earthers, but in reality we came at this as skeptics of our own bias, our own beliefs. And when you turn your attention to that, that's when you start to break the spell, if you like, and realise that it's not what they've been telling me it is. And that's pretty much as far as you can go. The idea or notion that we should somehow adopt some, cartoon, straw man, flat earth is absolutely absurd. People have to be realistic about this. You don't know the full dimensions of where you are or where you think you are. We can only take the claims that are put to us and dismantle those claims and see if they hold up to scrutiny.
I think that's the important thing, that everybody has to do that. And it's as much an inquiry into natural science as an inquiry into your own mind. Understanding exactly what beliefs you hold to be true and what you take for granted, but for which you have absolutely no evidence, other than TV images or propaganda, as Dale quite rightly says. Yeah. So, I mean, to use the word constitution, I like to take that as part of the basis of things of which I know. So when I talk about the Constitution, I mean, I know the Americans talk about it in the framework of the founding fathers and the political system that was set up. But your Constitution is also the constituent parts of which you are made. Yeah. So I mean, we're all constantly exchanging solids, liquids, and gases with our environment, right? In all imaginable ways through different orifices and holes. And that constitution of which we are made, is also the basis from which you can draw all your knowledge, right? I mean, that's all we have, and no man has any different from any other man, let's say a woman for that case, yeah. So that is, as Dale says, unites us, and our constitution gives us all the exact same experiences and perception of what goes on. So that's a starting point, at least, to have a reasonable discussion with people, right?
No, I agree. And, it's interesting. It seemed like a lot of people started coming to this conclusion around 2015 because I did as well. And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, this will be easy to debunk. And then the more I started looking into it, because my philosophy is the mind's like a parachute. It only works if it's open. So I'm open to everything because, hell, I think everything we've been told has been a lie. So I'm looking into this and I'm thinking, holy shit, there's something here. And then it was interesting because then I seen Dale come on. He came around in about 2015 and I was following him and a few other channels and just really taking an open look at everything. And it's quite surprising to me. What's really also surprising is how many people want to just knee-jerk dismiss it just because of their own thoughts and paradigms. And I thought that might be something we could kind of address too, just because they've been raised on this and they've seen it all on TV. That's all they ever know. They don't have they don't use their real life experiences. And so it's kind of like, how do you kind of get through to those top people? Because I know Dale tried the other day with a drunk barman, and that kind of went nowhere. But we also have kind of a philosophy too. It's not our job to wake up sheep; it's to wake up other lions. And if we can kind of get to that point, I think we could really start changing, the paradigm of all this. So, what are y'all thoughts on that?
Well, just as you say, Scott, you may have heard me mention this a few times, but the way I look at society, civilization right now, for me, it is a massive cult. And the reasons for that being is because the majority of the populace, in fact, all the populace, have no idea where they actually are. And for me, that's the foundation that you build upon. If you're building an existential, narrative or investigation into your own existence, you have to start from a foundation. So as you say, the majority of people are in a paradigm, and the paradigm has many layers to it. Right down to the family unit. The structure of a family unit, what's expected of the human being, how the life's going to be mapped to, what life means, what's important, what's relevant. And that, for me, it's all cult type, thinking. It's idea-based, concept-based, because if you don't have the foundation of where you are, if I gave you a game, a board game, and I gave you no instructions to that board game, then what's going to happen is you're going to start making stuff up. You're going to make your own game upon the board. Now, you might play the board, a game on the board, and it may work for you for a certain amount of time, but it's never related to the objective, aspect of what the board is, what's expected of you, your role within it, how it came to be. So at that level, the majority of people are living a delusional life. They're taking ideas and concepts, they're incorporating them, they're pursuing them, and telling themselves that they're living a life and that it means something to them. And it may do to them at some level, but in the objective sense, it's delusional because you don't know where you are, you don't know how it came to be or why you're here. So whatever you're partaking in is, for me, a delusion.
Gav?
Yeah, very salient point. I mean, you have the old biblical 3-10 or 4 if you're lucky, and for the most people it's a kind of zombified living, right, with no actual idea as to, as Dale says, where they are, what this is all about, and what its purpose is. And people seem to have lost sight that is an important question to answer. So we're all easily distracted from beer, football, and all the nice things in life. Don't get me wrong, part of the family unit. So I'm not, wanting to disparage any of that, but we've lost sight of some of the bigger questions, and it certainly took me a while to readjust or recalibrate to that. Even seeing through all the different things that happened in life, from whatever 9/11, just to start with that. But I don't know where it's going to end, because it would seem that there's one deceit after another that's being unveiled in some sense or another. And I think that for me is important. That people actually wake up, that they do their own work, that they inquire objectively into what they're doing, and not just to buy products, buy mental objects sold by magicians, or people who are in it for sleight of hand or for some kind of agenda or power.
To me, it's so many people just want to go along to get along and just follow the herd. And to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, such as y'all have done, and to go against the grain, that takes a lot of, muster to do that. And it's like, how do you really instill people to stand on their own feet? I mean, what would you suggest to people to say, hey, look, I'm not going along with this horse shit anymore, and I want to know the truth. And so, I mean, how do you get people to that point? I mean, what does it take? Because that's my biggest question, is like, where's the pushing point to where people actually start using critical thinking skills and start just buying into the propaganda? And that's my biggest sticker point right now. Go ahead.
Well, sorry, Gav, I'll just interject here if that's all right. Well, you'll obviously add to this. Well, a lot of the things that we talk about again comes back to the individual, and for me, the root of this lies at empowering the individual. Years gone by, we used to have a staple diet of a liberal arts education, and in the liberal arts education part of that, the first part of that would be termed as the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric. And it's basically a process of the workings of your own mind, how to take information, how to process it properly, and then come to a reasonable conclusion. And that was removed from the main staple of education around the late 1800s, as far as I can tell. And from there, we have devolved into more ignorance, more stupidity, more apathy. So for me, just to cut it short, the root of this lies at the individual and their ability to process and comprehend the workings of their own mind, and that lies in the teachings of the trivium.
Yeah, so I agree. So to add to that, I think the big thing is to empower individuals, right? And for that, they need to have some certain knowledge, I think, and trivium is a good example of it. To go on from that, you would take the quadrivium, and together these four and the three make the 7 liberal arts. The quadrivium being music, astronomy, geometry, arithmetic. Yeah. So having that basic knowledge, I think, gives people, and we can give maybe some examples of this in a minute, gives people a foundation on which to stand and say, no, I can see through the bullshit that's been told to me. So that's the one thing. And the other thing I think is by example, showing courage, right? If anybody's watched Dale's channel, then you can see, he headbutts people. And I'm not saying that physically, but, digitally, it's clear that we take no nonsense, right? And that taking a no nonsense also instills, I think, a certain courage in people that it is okay to stand up and call out bullshit when you see it, right? You don't have to be politically correct and hide, or you don't have to couch your words. You can actually stand up and call a spade, bullshit. And I think that's important too. But it has to stand on a certain knowledge, and I think empowering people is definitely the major step for that.
I agree. And y'all have brought up the trivium quite a few times in your different videos. And I have to admit, I never heard of that until I heard y'all. And, of course, I've got the grand old American education system, where you got 12 years of garbage. But why don't y'all go ahead and just touch on the trivium and give a little brief introduction about it? Because I think, you're absolutely correct about the lack of knowledge is one of the main reasons people don't have a solid footing to stand on. So kind of explain the trivium to people, because I'm sure I'm not the only one never heard of it.
Yeah.
Well, you go to, if you give an example of that, I'll dive into the quadrivium. Yeah.
Just as you were saying there about knowledge, knowledge I would term as information, and that's part of the trivium, where the first part is the grammar, so you would term that as knowledge or information, and then you have the processing part, which would be the logical processing of that, to see where the contradictions are, to see if things are laced with a fallacy or built on an assumption. And from there, you can either come to a conclusion that you can verify or you can falsify. But just to touch on what you were saying about the American education system, this was worldwide, and it's like I think the term was a Prussian education system, where it was more about mimicry. So for the majority of us that went to any sort of public schooling, it was pretty much broken part of information that you were expected to regurgitate on command and put into your own words, thereby solidifying it as being some sort of truth. And the reality is that I took absolutely nothing, nothing of any significance from my education that would serve me in any real purpose for my later life. And it continues to this day. This is how they can push agendas, narratives, existential storylines through mainstream science. Because again, people are not processing what are given to come to their own conclusion. They're just being commanded to accept it and regurgitate it, which I think is to the detriment of each individual.
Yeah, and I agree that Prussian system is definitely a worldwide phenomenon. So I don't think it's specific to any one country. It seems to have been implemented everywhere. And stripping people of the trivium, let's say the understanding of grammar, logic, and rhetoric, is exactly that. It dismantles the people's ability to selectively actually think for themselves. All they're getting is information that they're supposed to repeat and regurgitate. So, I think that's definitely, and what a good example of that is the understanding of the difference between formal sciences and natural sciences. Yep. So, a formal science like mathematics, for example, which everybody would tend to think is some kind of natural science, it isn't a natural science. It's a formal science. It's a language. So it relies heavily on grammar, logic, and rhetoric. There's nothing, mathematics is not a natural science in like physics or chemistry or biology or any of those things, right? So, having that kind of knowledge and understanding, what a formal science is, what a language is, and how to use it is one of the ways that propaganda can be used against people, right? Because they have no understanding of the actual words, the terms and the definitions that are used maybe are not, clear to people. They'll misuse common words and redefine them. And you can see that in any system, in the political system as well. How words get redefined. If we look at identity politics or racist politics or any of those things, then you can see grammar, logic, and rhetoric at work against the populists.
Yeah, but that's the beauty. Once people start to comprehend that, you can start to see it in any aspect, political system, religion, science. You can then start to identify the use of fallacies, the use of false reasoning, or illogic. And again, for me, just to touch on it, because I always worry that people get bogged down by terminology like the trivium, and then they start to perceive this as like an academic teaching. People have to remember that things like the trivium were mapped out by people because of social interaction, of living life, and they managed to map the workings of the mind quickly, and identify how to separate lies and fiction from truth. And then it became, a staple diet. It was a produce that was then offered to people. And that, for me, it's a nurturing tool rather than, trivium is not something that exists subjectively, yet again, just like mathematics. But it's a very useful tool for nurturing. And if you get children at a young age and you know when to introduce certain aspects, it can nourish the child and help them to flourish, to be able to stand and be independent, critical in their own thought,
And that's a very good point. And I think just to reinforce that one, all these words like trivium, and people think that there's some kind of secret in there. Sure, it allows people to see red herrings, distractions, fallacies, so don't get me wrong, it's a good practice to read such a book or read some of that literature. But people shouldn't forget it's what they do every day, yeah? So, we talked about this, I think, in the last Hangout briefly, at least, that, critically asking people when they tell you things is part of something that we do. Scott, if you were to tell me that you were out flying yesterday, or doing something that, I would maybe say, well, is that true? Where were you then at 9 o'clock? I would use a question and answer format to try and break down to see whether you're telling me the truth or not. And that is, if you like, just the trivium in practice, right? I'm looking at the words you're saying, right? I'm looking at the logic of where things are maybe falling apart, and I'm listening to the rhetoric, the embellishments that you're maybe giving your story, and I'm trying to cut through the bullshit. So this is not something that's, mysterious in any way. It's just something that people don't necessarily do or think about it properly, yeah? That's what they also need to break through institutional bullshit and not just the crap that your friends might be telling you. Yeah.
And when it comes to the question of the global Earth heliocentric model, this is when you start to apply this is when you see that it's fraught with, fallacious reasoning, mathematical sophistry, based on assumptions, and it has absolutely no relation to what we talked about earlier, the natural sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, real world substance, real world practicality and demonstration. So, once you start delving into the global Earth model of that assumption, you can see that it is held up purely by sophistry. You know,
by clever grammar, clever logic, you know, and rhetoric and sophistry. Yeah.
I just laugh sometimes when I listen to some people, you know, try to defend their position, and some of it is just so retarded. It is laughable, and just to hear you just kind of dissect it and kind of pull it apart. I mean, what would, you know, be some of the funniest moments you could probably recall about, or anything, just, you know, starting to kind of pull the onion apart on people, or maybe their defenses they try to, you know, pull or something.
Well, I think there's one where we've probably got a few funny examples, but let me just give it a bit of context. So we just talked about the trivium and the quadrivium, looking at the kind of sciences like geometry, and I'll take this as a specific example because it's been, you know, a part of philosophical discussion for hundreds of years. So one of the things that I think is key to discerning between the heliocentric fantasy and our direct reality is the so-called visible world. That there is a very clear separation between physical, corporeal, substantial things, objects that do not change shape and size, right? That stay exactly the same way they are in our physical reality, and what we call the visible world. So when you look at things, they have different shapes and sizes depending on where your eye is situated. You can do this in the comfort of your own home. You know that the table that you have in your own living room, right, is maybe square or rectangular, as most tables are, yeah? But depending on where you are in the room and you looking at that table, it might have the form of a trapeze, yeah, a parallelogram. It's going to look different depending on where you are, yeah? And if you pay attention to the visible world as opposed to the physical object that these visible objects signify to you, then you actually start to see a very clear discernment between the two different geometries that are also at play. Yeah, one is a substantial world that, as I say, you can translate objects in the physical world and they will not change shape or size, yeah? But the visible world is completely different. It constantly changes shape and size as you move around in it, yeah? So I think, and I personally think that's one of the keys, because the globe always uses what we call visible proofs. It's always visible phenomena, looking at luminaries in the skies and making interpretations, talking about ships sailing over the curve and missing the bottom. All of their proofs are based on the visible world, and there is no physical demonstration, as Dale says, of what they're claiming, yeah? That we're living on the outside of a ball. So Dale, maybe you can just expand on that, because I think there's some very, you know, we've had some laughs about that in the past.
I can add to that. You know, Scott, you were asking about some funny aspects. There's one that comes to my mind, and just to highlight and embellish what Gav was saying there about the different geometries. It was an interaction at Glasgow University, and one lad in particular, when I was trying to highlight the separation of the physical world and the physical world, I brought up and again, everybody can relate to this. You understand in the physical world that parallel lines, like train track, you know that they never converge, they remain parallel to each other for the entirety of the journey. But as we look at those train tracks, they appear to converge, so that the two parallel lines appear to come to a point in the distance. The cognitive dissonance that I experienced in this case was absolutely hysterical. You know, this lad was denying that the parallel lines converging were a part of vision, and was stating that it was a part of the real world. So, you know, and you're dealing with higher educated, you know, students apparently here, and they don't even have the basic ability to separate, as Gav was saying, the two geometries of the tangible three-dimensional world of objects and how we perceive them through vision. So, you know, that's just one example. And again, just
one good example that you need to cut in. You know, I mean, if you're looking down the street and you can see the lampposts are a lot smaller and the people are a lot smaller the further away they go. I mean, nobody in their right mind would think that there's midgets and dwarfs living down at the end of the road, right? So I mean, we've had some really funny, discussions with people who will nearly maintain that is the case until it finally dawns on them, Scott. Yeah, oh yeah, true, yeah, no, they can't be, and it's actually quite funny to witness. Yeah, and we like to bring up those kind of examples that you don't really think midgets are living at the end of the street, do you? As an example of an absurdity. Or some kind of ridiculous statement, so that they wake up quicker, right? So that they get it. Yeah.
And again, this is an example of how blind people are. They never pay attention to their direct, immediate reality, and really focus on how they're perceiving the world, and realising that there's a separation of how they perceive through vision and how the world actually is laid out. So that's one thing that we would strongly encourage people to pay attention to, particularly when you come to investigate the globular Earth model, as Gav touched on. It's solely focused on making assumptions of intangible phenomena, that being the sun, the moon, the stars, the luminaries, and then from those assumptions making assertions about what these things are, their position, and how it relates to the Earth. And again, as part of the sophistry and the use of red herring fallacy, the globular Earth model, predominantly 95% of it is a focus on the luminaries, where I would suggest to people when they ask the question, how can you ever gauge the dimensions of what you stand upon while looking at what's above you? To use an example, if I came to your home, Scott, or anybody that's listening to this, and you asked me to fit, or measure your floor, and I showed up at your home with a telescope, and then aimed the telescope at the light fixings in your house, and then from that started making assertions about the dimensions and shape of your floor, you would be calling the men in the white suits to come and remove me from your property. But yet we have this as a staple in mainstream science, that this is the reasons for why we live on a globular Earth. It's absolutely preposterous.
Well, I think a couple of real interesting points that, when Gav was saying math is basically a form of language, kind of like legalese, and how they're really just twisting they're redefining the definitions, and you don't know those definitions. And that's one of the key points, and everybody's operating off NASA. And that's the only fallback and that's kind of like one of the main things is, if you think we went to the moon, then you're already going to be glued to this globe model, just for the sheer fact of the brainwashing and propaganda that you got through that. I mean, you saw it on TV. We went to the moon. Okay, great. What else did you see on TV? Jaws?
I mean, there's a simple way that people can eradicate the idea of the moon and outer space. But before we even get to that, you were talking about redefining things, and this is one of the things that you see when you investigate the globular Earth. Scott, you're a carpenter. There may be many people that listen to this that have experience in construction or levels and plumbs. Now, when you go and look at the globular Earth model, they have redefined the word level. Now, if I ask you, Scott, what does level mean to you? How would you describe the word level?
Oh, there's no deviation in elevation from point to point.
It's a straight line. You can draw a straight line from any point upon the plane to any other point. Well, that's what we know and we comprehend and practice in the real world as level. Now, the globular Earth model, they redefined that to mean equidistant from the centre of the sphere to the outer circumference of the sphere, and now define level as being a curved line. So that's just one example,
Yep. A straight line is a curve that's not curved. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, that is a typical example, and you warned me at the start not to dive too deep into mathematics and physics, but this difference between the Euclidean geometry, the one we use for all practical construction, and the Euclid Elements was, it's basically the book that allowed the modern world to be built. Yeah, is all planar. Yeah, and spherical geometry, the spherical geometry that they want to say is the curved space-time and all these other things are two entirely different concepts, but it's quite easy to move between one and the other with some of the redefinitions of the grammar, of the logic, and the rhetoric, right? So that, just to take us back to what we originally said, if you redefine the arts and terms, and you define a straight line to be a curve with no curve, then we can automatically, jump between the two things. So I'm keeping this very simple, but I just wanted to make that tie back into the trivium aspect. And maybe just another example to give people, this isn't difficult. So, the one thing that the globe people always like to say is that eclipses are proof of a globular Earth. We must be on a ball, yeah, because we can see a circle in the sky and we have eclipses, yeah. But it's really easy to see that cannot prove that we're living on a space ball, because it assumes space balls to begin with. It's called circular reasoning, yeah? You're already assuming that there are space balls in a vacuum that are getting in the way of each other to cause a shadow on a space ball, but then you're trying to invoke that as proof that you are on a space ball, on a curved ball. So that kind of circular reasoning is actually very easy to see through. That's all you need to know. Any talk about eclipses proving that we're living on a sphere is absolute nonsense, because they're already implicitly assuming it. And again, that's just an example of understanding the logic, the grammar, and the rhetoric, and being able to see through their ridiculous arguments. Yeah.
Yeah, and as I said a minute ago, the whole space narrative, you can apply yourself to real world direct physics. So if you take the claim that space is a medium that is a vacuum or an area of low pressure, and we live in an area of pressure where we have gas in a pressurised system. Now, in physics, we can comprehend that in order to have varying pressure, like a lower pressure system and a higher pressure system, you must have a solid membrane between the two of these things. And if you do not have a solid membrane, then you get an instant equilibrium, which means the higher pressure is going to move immediately into the lower pressure region. Now that's physics, that's physicality. We know these things that we can demonstrate to each other time and time again. So right there's a problem, there's a contradiction to what we know and what we comprehend through real world interaction and real world physics to this, planetary NASA mathematical conceptual physics, where these things are 180 degrees to what we actually demonstrate time and time again. But you've kind of faith in this, and then they're going to invoke all sorts of other conceptual gibberish to reason it away and make people believe that that's a possibility, when in reality, physicality, direct experience would tell you that the claim is absolutely absurd. So right there and then, people should be removing themselves from the notion of outer space vacuum as some sort of reality, because it's absolutely absurd.
And I think one problem with why people maybe don't do that is that they want to replace it with some other model. We're so, how should I say, brainwashed into wanting to believe some concept that we're not prepared to just stand there saying, well, wait a minute, I don't know where I am. I have no bloody clue what the shape of this earth is, but I can see bullshit when I see it and when I hear it. But so instead of people standing on that firm ground, they'd like to take some other concept, which is why you get all these flat earth models, flat earth maps, flat earth discs flying in space, because people, really want to replace it with something. And I don't think that's a healthy thing to do. I think it's much more healthy to know what's not true, that goes against your direct physical experience and reality, but not to necessarily want to replace it. And just one thing on top of that too, that I think is very important. I kind of see the objects in three categories. So there's physical objects, real corporeal, substantial rocks and mud and earth and water. There's what I call visible objects, or what we call visible objects, the way our world is perceived by the senses, or by the globes that are inside our heads. Yeah, we've got two of them. They're spherical. And then, as Dale quite rightly said, these mental objects of thought, so concepts and ideas. Yeah, and people need to separate these three things. Yeah, and understand that you can't just apply everything to all of these objects. They all obey different rules. Yeah. The physical world has natural laws. The visible world has its own geometry and its own, working, and a lot of it has to do also with your perception and your mind. And then you have the mental objects, where you need to be very careful, because that's where people make up stories and fantasies and mathematical concepts and ideas and try and sell you a product. Yeah. So, sorry, Dale, I thought you were going to.
No.
Well, there are some very weird stories behind a lot of all this. And when people really start looking into all these strange connections, you know, I can understand why people do want to try to tie shit together, just because, you know, you want to try to get answers to some of this stuff. And I know I took a trip last year to Thailand, and what was real interesting is the actual flight route that it took, because when I came back, I really paid attention to it. And you land in Qatar from Thailand, and then from Qatar it would fly straight over damn near Moscow, Russia, and St. Petersburg for sure. And the way it would kind of come down across Iceland and come through the little section of Canada, it came straight down North Dakota all the way down to Dallas, and that's, you know, straight up north. If you put that on that flat map, it's a straight fucking line across all the continents. But if you put it on a globe model, it just don't even make sense. It looks like a big ass horseshoe. It's like, why in the fuck are they flying all the way around? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of weird shit to it, but there's physical observations. And then when you hear, you know, stories about, I mean, because I know y'all talked extensively about, you know, being out at the ocean, you know, and you know, my thing was, when you looked out at the ocean straight out, you know, the water is, let's say it's a flat, calm day, the water's at feet level. But when you stare out, what did it rise up 6 foot to meet me at eye level? You know, that's impossible. It didn't run uphill. And so, you know, these are physical observations, and people using those P1000 cameras and just pulling shit in that's supposedly over the horizon. And these are physical observations that people have made, and it's been documented. So there's definitely a lot of shit.
But hold on, Scott. There's one thing that we need to just separate there. So when we're looking at maps and projections and observations, visible observations again, then when we need to be careful, we're in the range of mathematics and we're also in the visible world. You know, just to pull it right back to water, and water being, you know, the absolute perfect example, and the proof, the QED, right, that we cannot possibly be on a ball. You know, Dale, maybe you could jump into this, but for me, that's the more important anchor that people have to have, right? The physical, substantial world, as defined by 75% water on this earth, tells us that it's impossible that we're living on the outside of a sphere. Forget all the observations and maps and all of that stuff. Water tells us.
Yeah, that's the, you know, because it's more simplistic and it's direct to every single person. I mean, every single person can observe, practically play, you know, have a direct interaction physically with the substance that we call water, and everybody knows that it has no ability to take the shape of, you know, shapes and objects. It will take the shape of its container. It will form a free surface, a horizontal plane, if you like, if undisturbed. And again, this is when you start to see the language aspect, when we start invoking terms like about gravity. Gravity does this, and these mathematical, you know, terms that they think usurps the direct, you know, experience of the surface. Now, if somebody's going to tell me that water, you know, has a certain behaviour or a certain aspect to it, but they can never physically demonstrate that to me, then again we're into the realms of fantasy. You know, if you're going to say to me, at some unspecified scale, water takes on a new property where it can have new behaviour, then that burden slowly lies with you. And offering me an image to support that is you know, preposterous. It's all the other stuff in there is irrelevant. Take it right back. We have this abundant substance that, you know, is claimed covers more than 75% of this area, the world, whatever people want to call it. Then we know through our life how that stuff behaves. It should tell you there and then that you're not living on the exterior of an oblate spheroid. We are in some sort of containment, and that containment is level. You know, we have undulations. This is the problem with the terminology flat earth. We have undulations, high points, mountain ranges. We have low points, trenches. But all of these things are gauged by what we call terms of trail.
No, I agree. I agree.
I think
totally.
it's a very important point. This aspect of being able to prove this to yourself and live life. In fact, you don't even need to prove it to yourself. It's self-evident, right? It doesn't matter whether you're filling water in a pan, whether you've taken a bath, whether you're going to a swimming pool, whether you're going to a dam or a lake, or whether you're on the west coast of Scotland looking out 40 miles to the island on a flat cam. You know that water does not have the ability to conform to the exterior of shapes, yeah? So if that's the case, and everybody's lived life all across the earth, right, sees and understands that, not only looks at it, but can also physically interact with it, then that's enough. That's enough to know that if somebody showed you an image on a screen of a round ball covered with water on it, then you know that cannot be true. But that's when you should start asking the question immediately, well, hold on, there's something wrong here. I'm believing something that cannot possibly be. I should, one, start to look at my own mind and understand how did I come to that belief. And I should not be just blindly believing people who tell me that it's so, and all they're offering me up is images and mathematical concepts.
Well, it's kind of funny because the people that give us all these concepts usually are wearing those white lab coats, the scientists and everything. You know what the technical term for that is? It's called a schmuck. SMOCK. Almost sounds like schmuck. I just always thought that.
But I mean, that's a good point. We give away our power to authorities who we believe know better than we do, right? And that in itself is a wrong step to take. Yeah. Again, none of these people that wear white coats do anything different from me. They all have a shit in the morning, right? They all exchange gas and liquid with the environment, and they all come with the same common sense faculties and proclivities with which we are all born, right? So none of them are any different, none, right? And I can say this with certainty because I've been in the academic world as well, right? None of these people are smarter than anybody else or have any superpowers. But we've been, trained to believe that it's not possible for us to comprehend our own reality, and we have to give that power to some guy in a white coat who's going to tell us how it all is. And people shouldn't accept that.
No, but that's been the structure for the majority of people's lives from a very early age, and it's the authoritarian dictate. That you believe what you're told, you show respect to authority and your elders, and take what we say and repeat it. So that's been instilled in people for a long time, and it's difficult for people to break out of that, and that's why they'll lend and give their authority and power away, because they've been, gaslit, if you like, to have doubt their own ability to reason and assess the reality. Reality is some complex mathematical jargon that only Albert Einstein or fucking Richard Feynman have the capabilities to decipher, which is absolutely preposterous. And again, just to touch on the aspect of mathematics, you can see it has been done through the ages, where mathematics has been elevated above the natural sciences. And these people have been idolised and worshipped. And these are the very same people who have pushed the Big Bang heliocentric cosmology. And that's became the staple, because they've usurped the natural sciences with mathematics, and it becomes so convoluted, so complex, that the majority of people will have the reaction of, well, I'm not smart enough to figure that out. But that's deliberate, as far as I'm concerned.
I would agree. I think that's deliberate. The old astronomical priests of the previous centuries have been replaced with mathematicians, right? Or mathematical physics, right? I mean, what Newton did with his whole cosmology and his calculus and gravity, these are all mathematical physical concepts. They're not, rooted in real physics. They're mathematical physics, yeah? And that's already where mathematics creeps into the whole education system. And as Dale quite rightly said, these are now the high priests. And we're supposed to believe, and it's not true. It's a language. It's a formal science. Yeah, I've been through it.
No,
There's nothing spectacular about it.
I think exactly when you said the Prussian model, I brought that up many times, well, several times before, that the education is a Prussian model, or they just beat it into you, and then the propaganda that just drives it home. And just like you're saying, we're putting all our trust and faith into these people wearing these white lab coats that, hell, I'd go so far as they're more indoctrinated than anybody. And then they start believing their own horse shit. And then they get the mainstream media to propagandizing, and that's how we get into this mess, and nobody will confront it. And, and people like you guys will, and once people start seeing, oh, well, shit, there is some pushback on this, and all of a sudden you find out, well, hell, there's some other people that think like me, and that's the kind of what is kind of hard to do, is figure out where those kind of people are, because, man, go ahead.
Scott, sorry to interject, but I think what has to be made clear to people is that this is not something that was just born on YouTube in the modern era. This is something that's been going on for a long time. I mean, if you look at the supposed ancient civilizations, not one of these ancient civilizations depicted the Earth or their cosmology as a heliocentric globular Earth. They all had depicted the Earth as a plane, and the globe would like to assert itself that it's been around for 2,000 years, or it established itself 2,000 years ago. I'm highly sceptical of that. I don't think it's been around any longer than 100 years, to be perfectly honest with you, because people back then, when they still had the ability to reason and discern, would have ridiculed and laughed at the preposterous, absurd claims that this model wants to make. So just to clarify for people, it's not something, because this is the propaganda in recent times, where they'll try and make people believe that it's a new phenomenon on YouTube of conspiracy theorists, but it's never went away. This is something that people have been looking at for a long time.
I would agree. They try to portray it as if the science has been settled for thousands of years, and that's just blatantly false. That's a blatant lie. If you look at the history, then as Dale says, you'll see that cosmologies were never based on that. So, my assumption is that it's started with the Newton definition of mathematical physics, and since then, probably in the last 100 years, they've ramped up the propaganda so that you can't switch on the television without seeing a spinning ball, so it really is ingrained within the education. And with the dumbing down of the people, it's a lot easier now to sell that product. And that's all it is. It's just a product that we're supposed to believe in because there's no proof for it.
And it's been accelerated in recent times. I mean, you can start maybe from the Nazi expeditions in the 40s. And obviously these same guys were then brought out through Project Paperclip and taken into America and different areas to continue their work. But we don't know what discoveries were made. There was loads of expeditions happening to Antarctica, the northern region. There could be any reason for why they started to push this globular Earth. But for me, it really started to become prominent from that era. And then obviously when television came about and they learned that they could manipulate people's perceptions through imagery, it really started to take off. Then we had the obvious, moon landing hoax, where, for me the whole game of that was to depict the Earth as a sphere. It was never really about going to the moon per se. It was about pushing the narrative that we live on a sphere. And from then on in, with a continuation, as the technologies advanced, we'll get more kind of high definition capturing images of the globular Earth from space. And it's even at this day, people can go right now and search, type in images of Earth from space, where if you're any sort of reasonable person, you're going to take a look at those images and see immediately that they're in no way, shape or form photographs. They're computer generated images. And places like NASA will openly admit that that's what they're offering,
And just to enforce that again, so I have the same opinion that they had to show us images from space. They had to make us believe that it was possible to go into space and look down on this space ball, because there's nothing in our direct reality that would even suggest that that's remotely possible, right? Or true. Yeah. So the only way to reinforce it was to pretend to go to space and show that, and then show us pictures and tell us lovely stories about astronauts and oh, poor Apollo 11 and whatnot, because there's all lovely emotional things that will get us all looking up. And so you've got a whole generation of young kids who want to explore the universe, right? Go boldly where no man has ever gone before and all that nonsense, yeah? And maybe there's other things that we should be exploring down here on Earth, the left to the right of us, north or south.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm conjecturing here, and I'll say it immediately, but
it makes, sorry,
it makes sense, right?
If we start to look at the psychology and you know, the globular Earth for me, you know, it's a limitation. There's so many agendas to be pushed from the globular Earth. First and foremost, the individual human being has been told that everything's been discovered, everything's been explored. There's nothing else there left to find. So, you know, choose your idea of your life, your job, your career, and go on with it. Also from there you can push scarcity, you know, limited resource, climate change, all this gibberish, these agendas that we're now pushing. And again, for me, it also disguises the fact that there may be other, you know, areas to discover and to explore, as Gav says, laterally across the way. While they have us all looking at smoke and mirrors above and into this supposed expansive universe of empty space and planetoids. The reality is that that's just not real.
Well, it's disempowering as well, right? I mean, again, you're left with well, what the fuck can I do if I'm just a small, insignificant monkey on a spinning rock in a vacuum? I mean, It literally takes away any kind of, how should I say, hope or reason for people so they just get on with their own egocentric or narcissistic then behaviour. Because, you know, that's all. What more have you got left if there's nothing else to discover? You can't get off the rock. Yeah, you have to permanently look up in the sky and fantasize that 5 generations from now we'll be inhabiting Mars. I mean, it's so disempowering, yeah, and I think that's absolutely intentional.
Yeah, of course, this stifles, for me, it stifles the human progress. And again, from there, that's never going to make any sense because it's a false foundation. It's not true, it's not reality. So, you know, this is for me is why we have so many religions, so many spiritual practices, you know, so many absurd concepts and practices that people partake in because they're desperately searching for some semblance of proof to their existence and their reality. If you believe you're on this globular Earth, you're never going to find that because it's too much of a massive mystery. Where if we're attached to something laterally, we can explore and find other clues to our existence, through chronology or through history, then for me that would empower, that would free people. It would give people proper foundation, they would feel more secure, and you know, probably be better people, rather than, as Gav rightly said. And even in the rhetoric these days, how many times have you heard this? Look at how insignificant we are, isn't it wonderful? I mean, what the fuck do you think that is going to achieve in the psychology of an individual? How insignificant are you? Emotionally adopt it and love it and appreciate that you're nothing. I mean,
come on, Elle, you're stardust. You need to love yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
You know, they just also have this problem where, you know, people are just starting to wake up to this and really start to, you know, look at it objectively and pull the onion apart and just start ridiculing the living shit out of some of this stuff because it is becoming they're creating their own shitstorm by fantasizing that we're going to Mars and all this other shit, and the images that they're showing are laughable at best and just plain evil at worst because of the propagandizing that they're pulling on people. But for people that are pulling this shit apart, it's just becoming an absolute joke to no end.
They're actually saying it blatantly on TV. I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, but I nearly fell off my couch laughing because they were showing it on national television in the news that, you know, that they were landing on Mars with this robot. And I mean, the commentator actually said, and now we're going to cut away to some real-time animations. And I thought, what the hell am I watching here? The news, scientific discovery, or the Cartoon Network?
Yeah, it's the Cartoon Channel.
So it's actually in your face, and if you listen carefully to what they're saying, they're actually, you have to buy into it, and that's the problem. That's when we get back to people not understanding how their own mind works. Yeah.
And just to look at the situation that we're in right now, the dysfunction, the extreme poverty, the stuff that's going on here in the world, not to mention that they don't even have never explored over 5% of the known ocean. But, through all this melee that's going on and the dysfunction that's going on, these people are going to Mars and outer space. I mean, what relevance is that to any of us? It's useless and futile.
Even if it was true.
Even if it was true. It's like, why the fuck are we wasting time when we can't even sort out our own affairs amongst us here?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm still laughing about the straight line with a curve that's not a curve. That to me, it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And one of the best points though is, what Cav was saying originally is that all this shit is based on a theory. There ain't a fact behind not one damn bit of it. It's a theory. And they've latched onto this theory, and everybody's just thinking it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And it's like, wait a minute, it's a theory. You can't prove the shit. So, here we go.
But Dale gives the perfect examples, where he said, bring me space time in a jar, right? Nobody can do that. Give me earth, water, right? And form it into a ball and show me water sticking to it. Not going to happen, right? Not going to happen, none of it. So you can see immediately that these things are just concepts, ideas, right? On paper, with equations or fancy words to describe them. None of it is practically demonstrable.
If we used any other example, like, I can fly, people could relate to that to say, well, that's bullshit because you can't demonstrate you can fly. But, that same discernment and critical thought should be applied to the globular earth, but people seem to, jump away from that kind of discernment. Just as we say, if something's a part of objective reality, then you should be able to scale that in any form, demonstrate it in a physical, practical fashion. But yet when we come to the globular earth and we ask the same question, like, get me a rock, put it in a vacuum, get some water attached around it, get some air pressure around it and keep it contained within this medium that's a vacuum. We know that that's an impossibility, but yet people still want to believe that it's true. The reality is that it's just not true, regardless of what's being presented to you on a TV screen or how highfalutin and elaborate these institutions appear to be.
But it just needs to be big enough, and then it will all happen. Give me a couple of space balls, and I'll prove it to you.
Exactly.
You need a jar of that space-time. That's what's going to fix it.
Alright, some gravity and some space-time in a jar.
Yeah. See, you just don't know how to mix this shit.
That's it. You need to be a special alchemist to work that shit out,
Well, I tell you what, we've been kind of hashing it out for a little bit, and I really appreciate y'all's time on coming on. Is there a couple of last words y'all would like to say before I kind of wrap it up?
I'll just go first, because obviously we're not really getting into any great detail of the globular earth and its claims, but if anybody's interested, we have an open platform. Myself and Gav are willing to have a discussion and get through any aspect of this globular earth or any of its claims, and we can help you to realise and highlight the absurdities, the contradictions, the use of fallacy within it. As I say, we've not had time here to get into any sort of depth, and it would require a lot of time, and people need to spend a fair bit of time and solidifying it for themselves. So we're always open to anybody from the common man to academia. We continually invite anybody to come and interact with us and have that discussion. And again, just to highlight to people, this is in no way, shape or form any form of debate. Reality is not an idea to be won or lost by rhetorical devices. It's about humans being intellectually honest, basing things on the first principle of practicality and practical reference, and any claim must be substantiated by providing the real, substance, the real physicality, the practical demonstration. And it's as simple as that for us. I'm a man of a practical world. I have no bias, no wish for the earth to be anything other than what it actually is. So I have no agenda. I'm not pushing any story. We don't monetize. We're not interested in making money out of any of this. It's an honest inquiry for anybody that's interested in it.
I don't think there's anything I'd like to add to that. Yeah. So the platform's been open now for a long time. Generally speaking, we just have globe cultists coming to hassle us, which for me tends to show that we're doing the right thing, and that they don't like it, and they'd like it to be silenced, the active inquiry. So I can only reiterate what Dale said. Anybody's welcome to come and have that discussion. And to say I'm a direct realist. This is about objectivity and not about subjective feelings, So that's all I'd like to add. Yeah.
Yeah, no, like I say, I've called it a few times. I've had some good laughs before, and I'll put y'all's links in the description so they can definitely click on to it, subscribe to your channel and stuff. And I can vouch for them. They don't have no promo codes or anything like that, so they're good guys, and it's usually a good conversation. And like I say, the trolls, I laugh my ass off on that because they just get their ass kicked. It's funnier than hell. But
and maybe just one thing. Greetings to all the Texans out there listening. I think it's the best state in America. I've been there a few times, and I'd like to come back.
Anybody that would like a life swap and come and live in the dreary, rainy west of Scotland, that would be I would love to go and live there.
I don't think you'll have any takers on that.
No, hell, I would love to come to Scotland, but hell, I think you have that 14-day quarantine shit, and I hadn't worn a mask once, so I ain't wearing no damn mask.
It's alright, because we're perpetually in quarantine, mate, because it just rains fucking perpetually. So you'll be alright.
Well, hell yeah, man. I'd love to make a trip over there sometime, man. And y'all are damn sure more than welcome to come to Texas. You'd love it here, man. It would be fun. But as far as for everybody else, everybody, didn't. This may be a hard pill or a hard topic for people that are just, listening to, saying, how in the hell could this be covered up like this for so long, And all you have to do is just look at, the election. Everybody got red pilled on that, how all the government came out, all the Hollywood, all the sports, everybody came out and just totally covered and rigged this whole thing. And so to think that they couldn't bamboozle you over all this too, and where you're living is a flat plane, and the whole moon landing thing was a complete hoax. Well, now you're getting red pilled on some of this shit too, and there's already people that already even follow y'all that are on this channel. So there'll be quite a few people that have been waiting to hear this video. So with that, I'm just gonna tell everybody, stay frosty, because the unveiling has begun. Thanks a lot. Bye.